You're listening to Permission to Shine, the podcast. Stories of overcoming obstacles and finding self-empowerment with Sherisse Bisram, Inner Power Activation Leader. The Oxford Dictionary describes permission as the action of officially allowing someone to do a particular thing, consent, authorization. What if you were that someone and you gave yourself the permission to be everything you wanted to be and more? No more playing small and accepting less than. You are worthy of the life of your dreams, regardless of what it is that you've been through. And honestly, it's exactly what you've been through that has shaped you into the version of yourself that you are now. Like a diamond, you've endured so much, but instead of breaking, you have become stronger and brighter. And if that's not a reason to shine, then I don't know what is. And if nature can do it, then why the hell can't you? You are brave, you are strong, you are powerful, and you are enough. Hear my call and give yourself the permission to shine, because you don't realise how many people are inspired by your light. Hi everyone, welcome to episode 49, and I am so honoured to be joined by the amazing Dr Nerina. Now, we cross paths on social media with the exciting connection of both being from Guyana in South America, our family descent. So that was really, really exciting through a lovely mutual friend. And I am so excited for Dr. Nerina to tell you all about her life and her accolades and the things that she's done, but most importantly, who she is as a person, because that's obviously the most important bit. So welcome, Dr. Nerina.
I insist you call me Nerina. Please call me Nerina. It's such a pleasure to be here today. I'm really delighted. As we were saying when we were chatting, we were both a bit tired. And I'm like, I could be having a nap now, but I'm like 100% so delighted to be here with you this afternoon. So thank you.
No, thank you. And I'm just excited that you are a doctor, and I like to celebrate that for you. That's why I was like, it's Dr. Nerina, because I think that's something really great. But equally, yes, you're a human being, and I will definitely call you by your name for sure.
I'm not a medical doctor as well. Let me just put that out there. A PhD in neuroscience. Um, so a scientific doctor, if you like, doctor of philosophy.
That's incredible, just in general too. But please do tell us, I guess, who you are in your job role right now, and then we'll pull the layers back a little bit more from there.
Okay. So in the world, I'm one of my most popular titles or labels is I'm called a sleep expert. And notice I don't say I am a sleep expert. I say I am called that because I never really set out to be a sleep expert. And I consider actually that what I do goes way beyond helping people to sleep, as important as that role is. But I basically 30 odd years ago, feeling into the energy of the world around me in the 90s. So I'm showing my age now. I've been doing this work for over a quarter of a century, which is a little bit mind-blowing when I say it that way. But back then in the 90s, the internet, mobile phones, email had landed on the scene. And I noticed that it was impacting on the health of my clients. So I had left the academic world and I was working in corporate healthcare in a health screening center, a bit like a Nuffield or a BUPA back then. And I noticed that people weren't sleeping well. They were getting more stressed. Mental health started rising. Those things weren't talked about so much in those days. But I started talking to people about sleep. You know, you'd get the Goldman Sachs traders or Merrill Lynch or whatever coming through for their medicals. And I noticed I could get them to open up if I said, how are you sleeping? They would talk, even the most tight-lipped one would talk. And I think I was fascinated by the subject of sleep because up until then, I wasn't sleeping myself. I had huge problems as a baby sleeping, and my mom would take me from one doctor to the next because I couldn't sleep. So maybe it was this subconscious drive to heal myself, you know, the wounded healer, that led me to having conversations with people about sleep. It led me to writing my first book, Tired but Wired. I've written 4 books, but that one got me famous in a way. Well, as a very, very low level of fame. You know, I ended up on the couch with Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby. Oops, shouldn't mention some of those names these days, apparently. But you know, I became known as a sleep expert. But the backstory, or the story that was quietly humming along in the background of this, was my own personal struggles, my inability to sleep. huge mental health problems, huge issues around addiction, impulsivity, um, eating disorders. I was really in a state of mess, but extremely high functioning. People wouldn't have known it. I was very good at kind of like papering over the cracks and standing on a stage. And because I started getting invited to speak in corporate events and conferences and stuff, I ended up having a breakdown or breakthrough, if you like, and being hospitalized at the Capio Nightingale Clinic, where I ended up being headhunted years later to work for 10 years purely by chance. In my usual clueless way, didn't realize when I went along for the meeting that it was the same clinic where I'd had that breakdown and been sectioned all those years before,
Wow.
because then it was called the Charter Nightingale. And when they called me in, it was called the Capio Nightingale, but they abbreviated it to the Capio. And I went along and thought, wow, oh my goodness, it's the same place. So ironically ended up working there years later for over a decade. And that gave me the courage to write Tired But Wired, because I thought, wow, I'm really helping people with severe mental health problems. I must have something to say. But while all of this was happening, I was slowly healing myself. I had an awakening when I was 34 in Australia, spiritual awakening, if I can call it that. And my life changed. I started viewing life in a different way and realizing that actually I was the soul who had chosen to come into this lifetime to heal some real wounds and some real shadows. And I'd chosen a family constellation which would give me all the opportunities to do so, while also being able to heal a lot of people in the public. So I'm now known as a sleep expert, but I also I do a lot of keynotes around energy, resilience, vitality, um, just what it means to be human. Increasingly talking about joy these days. I'd love to be called a joy expert, to be honest.
Maybe we'll take that. We'll start to name you the joy expert and see if it takes off. No, thank you so much for sharing all of that, because it's so beautiful. And I was like beaming on the inside as you were explaining your story, because I think that really is it, isn't it? It's like those moments in our life where we break open and it's like,
Yeah.
wow, I can't believe that all of this is possible and all of this has happened. And that full circle moment of you being admitted to that hospital to then working there sometime later, like the universe never makes mistakes. And I think for you to see that, so beautiful. And, the work you do is so necessary and so meaningful. So thank you for all of that, because I think that's so important. And I know that the greatest healers and people doing this work are the ones that have experienced it firsthand. Like we don't really choose to do
Yeah.
this work. It kind of chooses
Yeah.
us, as you said, that spiritual awakening moment. I've definitely had that to some degree myself when the pandemic hit. That was really my moment to
Yeah.
be like, wow, like what is my soul calling me to do? And exactly like my family dynamic was the perfect example of why my soul came and chose this body. So I think on
Mm.
that, if you're happy to kind of share, a little bit more about what it was like for you as a young adult, and then kind of how that's transitioned you into the woman you are today, it would be really lovely to know that a
Yeah.
bit more.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity to reflect on that, Sherisse. It's a really lovely question. Because I'm no longer a young person. I'm probably considered an elder. I'm a village elder, you know, and I've got a lovely goddess crone behind me on the wall there,
I
But
did see
I'm a
that.
village elder, and I'm increasingly moving into the space of trying to help young people. I myself have a teenager who's on her own healing journey, and my daughter is 19, and I'm holding space for her. But I know that when I was her age, I felt awful. Life was not a good space. It wasn't good. I now really honor and love my parents. My father's passed. My mother's 87 and still lives in Guyana. She has Alzheimer's. Um, and but growing up was pretty tough. But when I look at it now and looking back, what they came from was so much harder than what I came from. And you're from Guyana as well, so you'll know about the culture. Well, I think like me, you were born in England. I was born in Lambeth myself, me and my two siblings, but my parents were born in Guyana. Our ancestors are from India, so my great grandparents were from India and went to Guyana as indentured slaves. And there was a lot of trauma, a lot of alcoholism, domestic violence, a lot of choosing different religions to get better jobs. There was a lot of there was a great absence of stability anchors, I would say, and safety. And this manifested in my upbringing with a father who was incredibly ambitious. My parents came to England in the early 60s to make better for themselves and their family, but encountered the racism here. So my dad got his degree, didn't make it in medicine or law, went for the next best thing, engineering. And my mom was working in a factory to put him through university, Kingston Poly, I think it was then. And but they left England because of the racism, and he couldn't find opportunities that matched his abilities, what he thought his abilities. So he went to Guyana, and we all went back to Guyana in the 70s. And dad was working there while the racism between um, the black people and the Indian people. I sort of hesitate because I always think, is it politically correct to say that? But there was a huge amount of racial tension between blacks and Indians. And I remember going to school because I was in Guyana between 7 and 14 years old, going to school, and we had a guard in the car, and coming home, and we had a guard 24/7, and guard dogs, 4 guard dogs, because there was so much racial tension. And I ended up coming back to England when I was 14 because the Indian girls were being forced in Guyana to go into the national service, the army, and were being raped by the black soldiers. So there was so much racial tension growing up, but there was almost so much domestic tension. My father was very ambitious, but had incredible rages and didn't have the emotional skills to manage his rage that he'd grown up with. He grew up in a great deal of domestic violence, as did my mother, and poverty. They both came from a lot of poverty. So, he would beat us and he would beat my mother. And my mother left when I was 12 because for her safety, taking my brother, but eventually came back. But that was a memory I didn't remember until the pandemic. It was a recovered memory of her leaving. I'd completely forgotten that. But so there was, when I had this breakdown in 1995, psychosis or whatever, and ended up with a label of complex trauma, complex PTSD, and bipolar disorder. It's all of these things that had kind of brought me to this point. But now I don't consider myself to have any psychiatric labels. And now I don't entirely think it's necessarily all about my childhood. I think it's my soul sat on that conveyor belt up there and said, "Sweet, and in this lifetime." And where where do you want to go to get those lessons? So I chose this family, you know. But growing up was pretty tough, really. It was not a happy experience. Is that enough
Yeah, no, that was,
detail?
yeah,
Yeah,
really, really perfect. And I think that, it's so much of what you explained was very much my story too. So I
I
think,
wondered.
yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? How, and this is the thing about generational trauma and also, the trauma from ancestral trauma, I guess it is, to an extent. And
Yeah,
my family talk about that, the Indians against the blacks. And what breaks my heart even more so is that that was almost something that was set up by, the English people to cause the conflict between the two people
yes,
that were sent over to be slaves in that country. And that's what breaks my
yeah,
heart the most. And I think,
heartbreaking.
yeah, a lot of my older relatives are still in that space where, like, I'd say a few of my older relatives are still in a place
Mm,
where they're judgmental on that part. But for me personally
mm,
now, like, my family's quite blended. So, it's
mm,
not just all one race anymore. There's quite a
mm.
lot of mixes that have happened. So that's a lovely transition out of what was
Yes,
really difficult and hard. But I think that's the problem that I have with colonization as well as a whole. It's like they turn the natives against each other, or they turn the
yeah,
other races against each other in order to gain more power.
yeah.
And I think, in any
Mm,
situation, I feel like that's really what, yeah, the wrong hands of power look like, which is frustrating. But I'm, so sad as well for our lineage that they weren't taught better. For example,
mm,
the domestic violence, the alcoholism,
mm,
that was exactly what happened with my dad, but
mm.
I would say he was one of seven, and the shadow of trying to prove himself to his family
Yes.
caused him to obviously drink heavier. And then, like you said, the domestic abuse would happen. And me being the oldest sibling would have to hold back and protect my rest of my family because of it. He passed away when I was 17, but the part of him passing wasn't the hardest bit. It was growing up having to be that resilient young person and support my
Mm.
family emotionally and physically. That's what led to my trauma responses and wounds that I'd carried and probably will carry. There's always little dust of that we carry with us, and I feel like I've healed a massive part of that I'll continue to grow through. But a lot of that for me came from those experiences. And equally, for me going to school and stuff, there was still racism, so I could only imagine in that time where you came over how isolated you would have felt at that time, even in your area. And I suppose over time it got better, but it doesn't take away from the fact that it was hard, right?
No, it was really awful because I do remember one of the last experiences, when I was 7 years old. I was in Brockwell Park. We lived in South London, and going to the park, we lived opposite Brockwell Park, and my sister and I going over there and being chased by these skinheads called Packy Bashers. So that was back in the 70s. So we go to Guyana, we go into another hotbed of racism. So
Mm.
dad ships us out. I was 14 years old, came with my brother and sister back to England, and I went to an all girls private school in Croydon, the old Palace School, it was called that, you know. And another hotbed of racism. I was the only person of color. Probably there was one other girl in this whole school. And, I'd get all this stuff like, why do you smell so funny? Why are you talking like that? So there was a lot of that. And so I grew up with a very, very distinct lack of ability to trust friendships, to trust people.
Mm.
And my daughter and I talk about it a lot. And came across Ayanla Van Sant's book recently, the one where she talks about trust. It's called Trust, and she talks about the four levels of trust: trust in yourself, trust in others, trust in life, and trust in God. And I was telling Maya, my daughter, about it, and I think that even now at this stage of my life, where I probably have more friendships and sisterhood in my life than I ever have done, but it's taken decades to learn how to trust people
Mm.
and to build that, because I've always been very much a loner and lonely, a loner and lonely. But now I think I'm in this space of being very comfortable with being alone. I like my own
Mm.
space a lot, and I enjoy it, but I also enjoy the company of other people as well. But I'm also very selective about who I can spend time with, because I suppose the thing that I've learned looking back is that I'm a highly sensitive person and an empath, right?
Yeah.
And we're learning so much more about that now because it's all out there. People talk about this stuff now, but back then I didn't realize how sensitive I was, but it wasn't safe to be so sensitive, certainly not in my family. So I adopted behaviors that helped me to numb out, whether it was promiscuity or addictions, binge eating, starving myself, and then swapping those for exercise, extreme sport, marathons, triathlons, um, but anything but feel
Yeah.
anything but feel. And I finally have got to this point where I know how to cry,
Mm.
and I know how to cry. I know I'm getting better at being able to sit with my feelings. And I think for me at this stage of my life, in of eldership, is my work is very much now about, I want to help young people to feel, because
Mm.
I think so many young people don't feel safe to feel. They do because they're posting it on Instagram or TikTok, and they're doing the fake crying on Instagram or TikTok, but actually they're not really sitting in the pain, with the pain, riding through the cycle of the pain, coming out the other side. They don't know how to do it. And so, increasingly my work, so my fourth book I wrote during the pandemic, when I was personally going through another awakening, and another huge layer of grief. And I wrote my fourth book that was commissioned, Finding Inner Safety. which was the first book that was commissioned by a publisher, where they said, yes, you're allowed to not write about sleep. And I was like, hallelujah, thank God, thank God. This is a book I've always wanted to write, you know. But I would thank my roots for giving me the experiences and now the tools to do the work that I do and to help so many other people. But it wasn't an easy journey. And also, you'll know, I don't know how often you go back to Guyana. I go at least twice a year and have done for many years. But it's not like it's part of the Caribbean, but it's not like the Caribbean, you know? It's part of South America, but it's not South American. It's the only English speaking country. And so you're this kind of poor relative of it all. And the joke being that the ones who didn't stop, you know, when the boat went from India or Africa, the ones who didn't get off at Trinidad or Barbados or wherever, they went on to Guyana. It was the misfits and the mongrels and the runts of the litter went to Guyana. That's how they viewed it. So it's a funny culture, isn't it? I still think it's a very strange culture when I go back there.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually never been myself, and that's something that
Oh,
I've always
yeah.
wanted to do. But I think because of, well, I think the past few years we've wanted to go. One, I think the level of corruption rose at the time we wanted to go the first time round. Then funerals happened, weddings happened, then it's ended up prolonging us from going there but going to somewhere else instead. So, and really we want to go as a family unit, I think, because I would go on my own and just, you know, travel, but my family really want to go too, so it's one of those things I've got to hold the space for them to be able to go. But I know firsthand from that, from just, you know, my relatives that go frequently, and or, you know, ones that have, like my great aunt, her brothers still live out there, so then we're speaking to them on FaceTime, you know, we get the experience of it, and other cousins and stuff. We've got quite a lot of family still in Guyana. But so much of what you said there just deeply resonated with me, and I just agree with everything you said, you know, like I really and truly, I think that the 4 levels of trust is so important, and I think that that's really a massive part of the work that I teach too, because I think that, you know, in our coping mechanisms for how we've always lived life, whether it be from childhood experiences or, you know, learned behavior, whatever it is, I think that the thing that I learned the most was when I was younger, I was abandoning my own needs to support everyone else. And I think
Yes.
that through doing the work myself, I started to truly trust myself. So then I was able to trust other people more. And like so much
Mm,
of like my friendships have shifted, and my relationships have shifted in
mm,
just the last couple of years, because I no longer have to perform, you know, being a Leo, I no longer have to perform or work
mm,
hard to receive that love, because I love myself that much and I trust myself that
mm.
much. And that's really in my work, my formula, which is self-trust plus self-respect equals self-love. That's something I'm really
Yeah.
passionate about for that reason. So I think everything you're saying about, you know, your journey, even down to the fact that you used exercise as a copism not to feel, that was me as well, you know, like overtraining, over dancing,
Mhm,
overworking in order to not
mhm.
feel my emotions. Like I was like, yes, I've been there with you
Yeah,
100%. And it's just crazy, isn't
yeah,
it? Because I bet in that situation you were praised for working hard, praised for the marathons.
totally,
Yeah.
totally. And it made my dad I really wanted my dad to approve of me and to feel proud of me. I wanted to be his favorite child, and I probably was. I would say my sister didn't survive our childhood, so she passed away in 2002, very,
Oh,
very
sorry.
suddenly, very traumatically. So it's just me and my brother. My brother didn't have a good relationship with my dad, but my dad was always proud of me. I wowed him with my intellect, you know. But yeah, I feel that in his passing, where he is now, he's more proud of me than he ever has been. And I feel his
Mm,
presence very much in my life.
mm,
I feel him with me very much, very, very much. Um, and but yeah, it's the people pleasing thing.
yeah.
Sherisse, honestly, I mean, it's like, God, it's never ending. Just when I think, I'm really over this people pleasing now. I'm not doing it anymore. And then I think, but Narina, you did this thing yesterday. You did it yesterday. Things. That's just, just look at the most obvious ones, but there are probably loads more. Just people pleasing. And because you don't have the courage to sit with your needs and then meet your needs, or ask for what you need. So it's a constant journey of I'm a work in progress,
Oh,
layers and layers of
absolutely.
healing. I mean, it makes me laugh because when I got back from Brisbane, because I went off to Australia, and it was there that I had this awakening back in 1999. It was a real moment of grace, and almost like having going through some kind of psychedelic journey. And I've had some experiences with microdosing and psychedelic journeying, so I can relate it. But looking back then, it was nothing. It was literally just me and this kind of like embodied experience of grace and God. And I remember thinking, oh, this is it. So I was brought up in a very religious Hindu family, but I was non-religious. I'd really rejected all religion. And I went to Catholic convents and Christian Church of England schools in England, but rejected it all. But that moment was my first encounter with, I call God, right? I use the word God. Not everyone might do, but that's for me, that's my truth. But I remember coming back from Brisbane and thinking, right, now I'm enlightened. My life is just going to be wonderful. I am enlightened. I know it all. Little did I know, I was then about to, going into 2.5 decades of shitstorm, one thing after the next, including my sister passing and two marriages ending, and it just one thing after the next. But by then, I had a toolkit,
Mm-hmm.
and the grounding of faith.
Yeah.
And but it was still, I was still learning, because when I came back, that doing the marathons and stuff, that was part of what I felt. I was this is my spiritual practice. And some of it was, I would run marathons and chant the Gayatri mantra throughout the whole thing, and do it in 3.5 hours and hardly feel anything. Sorry, not 3.5, I was lying. Under 4 hours. That just slipped out, but always under 4 hours, but chanting the whole way through, virtually not feeling anything. And I told myself, it's because you're so connected to divine energy. And I was, but I was also spiritually bypassing and numbing out all the pain. I was so dissociated from my body. I was so disembodied, so disembodied.
Yeah, no, I absolutely resonate deeply with all of that. And I think, something you said there about making your father proud, that was definitely a thing in my household too. And unfortunately, my sister took the brunt of a lot of that. But instead of like living up to what the expectation was, she rebelled and went the other way. So then there was always this back and forth in terms of, I was the one that was, the favorite. And I would say that's because I always knew there was more for my life than that experience. Like I talk about this quite a lot on my podcast, but there was a moment, I think about 6 or 7 years old, and I just remember my parents having really big screaming match. And I just remember saying to myself, I'll never let anyone treat me like that. So from that point on, I really felt like I had to prove
Mm,
myself in the world and become something, because I couldn't live in this existence anymore. So I think even though he was proud of me, it was quite toxic the way I
mm,
like adapted to that. And even what you're saying about feeling your dad's presence around you, I agree. And I think that my understanding is that when they shed that humanness, they go into what their soul's experience was, and the soul contract they probably had was they needed to play that role in our lives in order for us to shape
totally,
into this. And I think that's a
totally,
really
yeah.
beautiful understanding, isn't it, of it all? But yeah, I guess it's so beautiful, like, and it's rich, isn't it? Because this is the thing, right? It's like we're trudging through mud, but when you get to that edge of the water, and like you're on the edge of the waterfall, it's like you either dive in and you see a new reality or a different reality, or you keep going the
Mm,
long way round. And I think that that diving in feeling of being like, okay, this is it now, we're going to be in a different space, or whatever it is it's expected of us, there's clearer water here, it doesn't mean it's not muddy anymore, it just means it's different. And it was funny because I literally heard someone speak about this on TikTok yesterday, and it was basically like there's flies in paradise. So even when you get
yeah,
to the point
yeah,
that you need to be at, there's still something there obscuring
totally.
you. And I think
Mm,
all of what you shared there, you know, like you really had that awakening, but equally the next stage of your journey didn't mean it was easy. It just was a different,
Yeah.
you know, different level, different devil, is what my other mentor used to say to me. But
Yes, I
I
like
guess,
that.
yeah, in your life in general, like obviously the podcast is
Mm.
called Permission to Shine. So I'd love to know where you see that point was in your life where you gave yourself that permission to shine.
Mm. Um, there's, there's been stages, because when I was very young and when I was in Guyana, I had a sort of stammer, and then when I came over to England and I went to the Old Palace School, the stammer got worse, and I was also very, very, very quiet. And I remember there's a school report where the teacher said, had written Nadia, because my first name is actually Nadia Nerina Ramlakhan. And the school report said Nadia is self-effacing and reticent and needs to speak up more. Yeah. So I was like, what does it actually mean? And then I go and look them up. And I was like, wow, self-effacing and reticent doesn't feel like me, because inside me, I felt like a Bollywood dancer, right? I felt like Hema Malini dancing on the grass on the glass in Sholay in the film, in front of all of the bad guys. Because we in Guyana, living there between 7 and 14, every Friday night, well, not every, depending on whether Dad was in a good mood or not, he would come home. If he was in a good mood, we're going to the Starlight Drive-In, all pile into the car, go to the drive-in and watch the latest Bollywood movie, crammed into this Morris Marina, like hot as hell. And sometimes you get torrential rain and you get blackouts, and you're all sitting there waiting for the blackout to pass so the film can come back on. But then the next day, again, if Dad was in a good mood, I'd reenact what happened on that stage. And I would say, right, to get the whole family to sit down, and I'm going to do that Bollywood dance from Sholay for you, or whatever film it was. So I had always had this need to be on a stage of some sort. So
Mm,
when this thing, in when I come to England and they say you're shy or whatever, it's like, how, that's not me. So I think I consciously made this choice when I turned 17 or 18, that I was not going to have a stammer, and that I was going to be the life and soul of the party when I went to university. And I changed my name. I cut my hair very short. I had hair so long I could sit on it, but I reinvented myself. And I became very popular. I was very popular at uni. I was the one who would be partying with the boys, dancing and drinking. But I was just performing a lot of the time. I was
mm,
performing. And inside I was very unwell. That was the start of, eating disorder, suicide attempts, all that kind of messiness was going on, because I had this persona. So on one level I was shining, but I wasn't really.
mm.
And it was only after the healing, this awakening in 1999, that I started stepping out into myself. But there were still a lot of shedding that needed to take place
Yeah.
over the decades. And now I consider myself still to be shedding. I do the TV stuff. I do a bit of TV. I do a bit of radio. I stand on big stages. I open conferences. I do stuff like that. But I'm still stripping away layers of inauthenticity
Mm.
so that I can become a more embodied, authentic version of myself. And
Yeah.
Sherisse, it's still happening,
Yeah.
because I'm actually on the precipice right now of another step up. And I am scared shitless
Yeah.
of what that's going to involve, and showing up, and what that might look like, and the implications for me and my life. And if I step into that, what do I need to what do I have to shed? And so I'm
Mm.
still, I people say you have presence, you're very shiny, but there's always more that could come.
Yeah, no,
I think.
absolutely. And I love that, like, really raw answer, because that really is the truth, and I think with all of my clients that I work with in this work that I do, like, that is exactly the core of what I say, you know, like, we have to shed the layers that we've, you know, the armor that we've put on ourselves for years, you know, and it's constantly that evolving stages evolve. We have to keep taking off things and clearing space. And, you know, like a really good way that I do that is physically clearing space as well. I'm like, okay, like, something needs to move here. Let me physically
Yeah.
move some old clothes out of my room, you know, like, I'm actually physically doing it, because I'm like,
Yeah.
you know, even like my thing for this full moon coming up in Scorpio, I'm like, I'm going to clean my car. Like, that's my thing. Is like, my car isn't like awful, you know, but it's not spotless. And I was like, right, my thing for the full moon is I'm clearing my car out, and there's one sort of set of cupboards that I've got in my room that I was like, right, I'm going to blitz through that as well, because then that's me physically shedding, so the energetic shed can happen even more so, because I'm so conscious of that as well. And I think, as you said, the more in tune that you've become, you can probably, like you said, you know it, you know, you're on the edge of that next stage. And it's like, what
Yeah.
needs to,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
my thing is what needs to die in order to be reborn. And I think
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is just, yeah, the thing about healing, about life, about this journey is it's never ending, isn't it? You know, especially when you're dedicated to being the best version of yourself, as you said, the most authentic version of yourself. And so many people aren't even doing the first step, and they're living like zombies, walking around wondering why nothing is working. And I think, again, our souls have chosen this path, so it does feel harder than most a lot of the time. But I don't know about you. I don't think, not any part of me would change the experiences I've had, because I wouldn't have become this version of myself to be able to help the people on a real, like, lived experience level. And I literally had that conversation with my client yesterday, where she was in such victim mentality. I had to say to her, life can be hard, and this is what's happened for me. And I was like, I could choose to sit in the space you're in now, or I could actually do the work I've done and become the version of me that I know I needed back then. And that's why I'm saying this to you, and that's why I'm here, because I'm not expecting you to do anything I haven't done myself. And she was like, yeah, okay. And I think that's the most authentic you can ever be, isn't it? When you're like, this is me, this is my shit, this is how I've moved through it. Yeah, and I think, I guess it's all different for everyone, right? But I think in our spaces that we're in this work we've chosen, I think that's so important, that it's not perfect and it's not shiny, and we're not, you know, these people that have all the answers, but we have enough answers, and probably more answers than most, and we're still learning them. I think that's the key point, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. And by the way, you've inspired me. So I'm also going to clear my office and my cupboard. And I'm actually part of this poised on the precipice is I'm I need to move house. I love my little house, my little mid-terrace cottage in Kingston near the river. It's time for us to move. It's, you know, I've outgrown the space, but that comes with some fear because this is my place where I've really deepened into my journey of safety and written the book about feeling safe, you know. But
Mm,
so you've definitely inspired me to start doing some clearing out. But I think also to speak to your point about there's so many people walking around like zombies, and I actually don't mind so much the zombies. You know, I've encountered so much density in my work. You know, in the last 3 decades. You know, going into environments back in the 90s where you couldn't do breath work with people, you couldn't talk about yoga. You know, you'd go into a Goldman Sachs, for example, and they would say, yeah, can you do that stuff? But, you know, don't do the breathing stuff. People didn't really appreciate that they really, that's just too woo woo. But now everyone's doing it, right?
mm,
Everyone's doing it. Um, so I don't mind. I'm used to dealing with people who don't know what they don't know, the unconscious.
yeah.
What's really getting on my nerves at the moment is the people who've awakened more recently, who are suddenly kind of like the experts and the gurus. And God, it gets on my nerves, you know. And I was out on Friday with somebody who's just kind of woken up. I know that's really mean of me to say this, just feels like in the last few minutes. And she was just talking at the group, just talking. I'd never met her before. Well, I just need to get away from here. I just need to, you know, because there was no ability, complete lack of ability to to know that there's a hell of a lot that she doesn't know. You know,
Yeah.
just because you've had an awakening doesn't mean anything. And actually, that's probably me back in the 90s, and probably still me sometimes. I have to get over myself and be humble to the fact that there's so much, you know. And when people come along and say things like, and I've been in groups where people have gone, I know this is my last lifetime. I know I've done all the work. And I just think, right, not coming back to this group again. Want to be in this person, not doing this again. But yeah, I think it's an interesting time because there's a lot of people waking up. And
Mm.
because of social media, there's a lot of waking up that is disembodied. There's a lot
Yeah.
of awakening that's happening halfway, as they would say in Guyana, you
Yes.
know? And you can tell, you know, you go on the social media, you go on the Instagram and the TikTok, and somebody's talking, and there's a complete lack of embodiment. They know the
Mm.
words, but it's not embodied. They haven't integrated it,
I
or
completely
they've done
agree.
that psychedelic journey or that weekend or that breathwork thing, and they've had a deep journey with somebody who held space for them, and they've come back and they haven't integrated. In fact, they've made a talk about it in the car before they've driven home afterwards. And there's no embodiment and integration and sitting with the experience and allowing it to permeate the 70 odd trillion cells, and then be with the discomfort that then ensues for the next few days, the grief it might bring up, the sadness, the arguments with the people the whatever. Is this speedy? An awakening. Let me post it. You know, and
Yeah.
I don't know if this is just the grumpy old crone in me, Sherisse.
No, but I think you're absolutely right and valid as well, because you're coming from a space of really going through all of this, doing it properly and experiencing it in a time where social media probably just was a thing. Well, it wasn't even social media wasn't started, I guess, when
Thing.
you were
It
at
was
your
a thing.
beginning journey, right? And
Nope.
I think
Yeah.
that now you're watching that, and I agree with you. There's so many cutting of corners that even for me in the coaching space, I look at it with exactly the same lens as you, like, are you sure? Like, how are you? And I can
Mm.
see, like you said, these millions of followers to certain accounts and people. And I'm like, this is a really scary space for people to be in because there's no regulation there. My last podcast I did, me and my guest, we were speaking about this because we'd been following each other on TikTok for quite a long time, my previous guest, and she was such a beautiful soul. And we both agreed that from watching each other for a long time, we knew that our values were aligned and that we were actually speaking from a place of truth and lived experience over
Yeah.
just thinking it was cool and it was the right thing to say. And I think that's the
Mm.
tricky thing with like the manifestation people as well, because I'm like, you can't manifest anything if you're not
Yeah.
in alignment with one, the vibration of it, but two, like feeling worthy and deserving and having the space for it to be received,
Totally agree.
And that's
Totally
my
agree.
piece on manifestation. I believe that
Mm.
manifestation is a byproduct of deep self-worth. So if that's not there
Yeah.
to start off with, nothing
Yeah.
else is coming in. And that
Yeah.
I'm really passionate about that. Even with my clients, that's something that a lot of them want to do and achieve in their life. And I'm like, that's just not something you can just click your fingers and receive. And I think
Yeah.
we're in this fast-paced world, and I meet people all the time with exactly that same conversation. I'm a really old soul. I'm like, can you tell people you're an old soul? I think you need to wait for people to tell you you're an old soul,
I
I've had
know.
that
I know.
just so many times over where
Yeah.
people are like, yeah, I'm a really old soul,
Mm.
and then just seeing it in like lack of emotional intelligence and stuff like that, and I'm like, you're not an
Mm.
old soul. The fact that you think you are shows that you've got more
Mm.
work to do there, because unless someone's actually said to
Mm.
you, wow, you're so wise, then that's it. And actually even that is frivolous in itself. I think that soul journey comes from, and the understanding of your soul's journey comes from really doing that deep work and that connecting on a deep spiritual level to yourself. And
Yeah.
I found that
Yeah.
when I started to do this work at the beginning, now like so many, like I even took myself through like my Akashic records last night, just from 4 years of just consistently building that to a place of deep understanding of myself on a soul level, and that's not something that you can just do. Do you know what I mean? That's something you build gradually over time. I think, yeah, anyone that's just like, yeah, I went through this hard thing and now I know all of this stuff, it's like, that's not just a one stage, is it? It's a lifetime, as we keep saying. So I think you're so spot on, and it must be even more frustrating for you, because I feel frustrated, and like, you've got all of these accolades and understanding and deep knowing and learning from your whole life experience. So yeah, I mean, I'm pissed off, so I could only imagine how frustrating that is.
I get a bit frustrated, and then I have to get over myself, right? Because the
Yeah,
world is evolving and things are speeding up and awakenings are happening quicker, and but I I'm less inclined to kind of fight about it. I've just kind
yeah,
of sit with it now, and I'm feeling a lot more comfortable about being quiet and just to
yeah.
sit and to just be in energetic authenticity, just to
Yeah.
sit in my beingness. And then if I'm asked to stand on a stage, then I'm gonna do the thing that I'm
Mm.
being asked to do. But I don't have to perform.
Yeah.
And I don't have to also educate people if they don't want to be. If I'm being paid to do it, to speak to people, of course I'm going to do it. I'm being asked to do something, that sort of thing. But I don't have to do that with my friends. I don't have to get them to a place. Everyone is allowed to be where they are.
Absolutely.
And also sometimes I learn things from the most, I would say, non-spiritual of my friendships, where I'll go, wow, you've really mirrored something back to me, and that was so wise. And you've really taught me something about myself there. And my daughter does it with me a lot as well.
Mm.
She's 19 and she's constantly mirroring stuff back to me. And I do think these Gen Zs and millennials, there's kind of a wisdom um in some of them, not all of them, but some of
Mm.
them, that needs to be allowed to come through, but it doesn't know how to come through in our world, in the world that my generation have created for them.
Mm.
And it's being seen as neurodiversity.
Yeah.
It's being psychiatrized, pathologized, when actually it's a way of seeing and feeling and perceiving the world that we haven't quite got our heads around.
Yeah.
So we give it a label.
I agree.
We'd give it a label. But what if those myelin sheaths and those nerve fibers are just differentiating and growing in different ways? What if the junk DNA is waking up and expressing in different ways? And now we're seeing a whole other way of relating to the world and a whole other set of skills, which is so different from what we've seen so far that we've got no category to put it in. So we call it neurodiverse.
Absolutely. I completely 100% agree. And that's something that I've actually been speaking about to certain friends of that exact
Mm,
nature. I
yeah.
think it's just, yeah, that we are adaptable, aren't we, as human beings? And I think that this is what's happening as these, I guess, the awakenings, or whatever we want to call them, different levels of consciousness, whatever it is. And I think from, I guess our cells are obviously, like, I was reading something, and we all know that, like, we are in the embryo of our mother's mother as we grow, so then the experiences they have
Yeah.
an impact on us and then on the next generation. So if you're
Mm,
for me, for example, like, if I'm learning all of this stuff and being really passionate about it, then my grandchild is going to also have a deeper understanding and knowing than, say, someone that doesn't have this understanding. No, it's a constant evolution, isn't it? Which is so beautiful. And I do think that um younger generation, and I see it all the time with when I teach, as you said, it's not everyone, but there's some real different points of view, like some real woke feelings, and and just passion for the world and people. And I think that's so beautiful to be in. But yeah, I absolutely agree with you in that we don't have to educate everyone. We don't have to
yeah.
um
Mm,
be the voice of reason to everyone. And I think that
no.
was me younger, living in my ego, feeling like, you know don't tell me this because of that, or you're doing that wrong. I was that person when I was younger, from a place of, fear and like trying to be known in my space or whatever, and ego and aggression. Whereas now it's very much like, um, I know what's right for me, that might be different for you. these are my beliefs, they're yours. And equally, you know, if it comes up in a conversation and someone asks me, I'll share. If I don't get asked, I'll just keep it to myself, because again, sometimes that inner peace is more powerful than trying to convince someone that
Yes.
doesn't understand. And that was something that I had to do and shift with a lot of friendships over the last few years, because
Yes.
I had
Yes.
to be okay with not disrupting my peace anymore to try and make people feel comfortable. And that was my biggest level of like self-trust and honor, was being like, okay, this person makes you feel like this, that's not good for you. You don't have to defend anyone, you don't have to protect anyone anymore. You know, if that level of, and this is my thing, is that, you know, like you said about the mirror, I feel like the more I've poured into my own cup and like worked on the parts of me that felt insecure and abandoned, and worked on healing that to the best of my ability as I can do now, and obviously that'll keep evolving, that the people around me now are mirroring the same sort of energy of like, okay, they're either working on themselves, or they're just comfortable in who they are, or they're loving from a place of authenticity, whether that looks the same as me, whether they're on the spiritual journey or not. I really do feel loved so deeply by the people in my life right now, and I think that's a really lovely reward from living so long in environments that had to work for respect, and it was never really, it was all surface level.
Yeah. I love that. And just the healing journey is ongoing, and we're always learning. And I just this morning I was just like, wow, I am so tired today. Am I unwell? Or is this just a need for just some deep rest? And I'm
Mm,
still and I'm called this sleep and energy expert or vitality expert. And I'm like, yeah, trying to work out what's going on with your own energy and my own sleep. And I help people sleep because I'm constantly working on my own sleep. And it is my Achilles heel. Is it my Achilles heel, or is it my golden ticket? It's the thing that's opened doors for me. But I still have to work on my sleep. And I sleep a lot better than I used to. My goodness. But I'll still have the odd night where especially if I'm going through a big shift. So yesterday morning, I basically woke up with a start at 2:30 in the morning and was awake from 2:30 until I got into bed. And I would, in the ideal world, I would have had a nap. I would have gone, but I had a meeting which I really didn't want to cancel. So I had in that, throughout the day, I had an opportunity to just lie on the floor for 10 minutes before I jumped in the shower to go and get ready for the meeting. But I was awake from 2:30 a.m. And it really it hit me when I got home at the end of the day. And then last night I thought, gosh, I'm going to sleep so well. And actually I didn't again, because almost as if my nervous system was so agitated, or it's still clearing stuff out. It's still
mm,
aligning and shifting and calibrating. So I have to keep doing the work on me. And I've noticed that if I try and step away from it, or if I try and show up as the sleep expert who's got all the answers, um, I don't get that level of buy-in that, I can feel it. But when I show up in this rawness of, I'm so tired, I've been up since 2:30, and it kind of gives people permission.
absolutely.
It gives them permission to go, yeah, my sleep has been so shitty, and even hers was. And I've had, I wrote a blog once called I Am Not a Sleep Expert. And one of my peer group, a professor in sleep biology as well, actually started trolling me on Twitter, because he'd been sort of trolling me anyway, and saying, even by her own admission, she's not a sleep expert. Why would you listen to anything she says? But actually, I don't really care. I mean, at the time, I was, sort of immature enough for it to have kind of rattled me a little, but now I don't really care. I'm going to speak my truth. And it's
Mm,
often when I'm in those places of rawness that people will say, that was so real. You were so real. I felt you gave me permission.
yeah,
Okay?
absolutely. And that really is for me why this podcast is this, that permission to shine. It's like, you know, the reason I do this and is to share these real stories so people believe and see that, you know, these people that are experts and are, you know, professional in whatever field they're in, it's like these are the real experiences we're going through right now, and this is why
Mm,
it's okay for you to just be seen as who you are, because no
yeah.
one's perfect, as we all know, but we still don't really believe that on a deep level until we hear it and be like, gosh, yeah, this woman is known as the sleep expert and she's also suffering with her sleep. You know, how
Mm,
amazing for me to feel seen in this space, you know. So it's so important. And I think you know, thank you for all of the work you're doing and the vulnerability and honesty, because I think this is the thing. There's so, in this fast-paced world, there is a lack of that. And I think you know, and almost people are doing that from a space of wanting to be liked, you know, like you said, the fake crying on social media and stuff like that. It's like, come
mm,
on.
I
But
know.
people really feel the authenticity, and especially young people, you know, with the people that I
Yeah.
teach. um
Yes.
you know, if I turn up and I'm like, I'm exhausted today, guys, so I'm going to need you to listen better, they're like, yep, sure.
Mm.
You know, they give me that little bit more grace because I'm honest from the start rather than pretending everything's okay when it's not, you know. Yeah, I love all of, you know, what you share and what you do. And I think yeah, for anyone that actually would like to work with you or anything like that, how can people find you? How do you normally
Mm.
operate in terms of work?
Yeah, thank you, Sherisse. So I have to say most of my work is one to many. I most of it's sort of corporate events, big keynotes, conferences, and things like that, and a bit of media and brand work. But I do a limited amount of one-to-one work. But I actually recently created an online program which is on my website. It's really inexpensive. It's pounds, it just costs pounds, and uh, it's because it's sometimes people think they need to see me and for a one-to-one, and actually they don't. And I have a methodology which is based on my decades of experience of working 10 years in psychiatry, women recovering from cancer, professional athletes like Chelsea Football Club. It's a real breadth of experience. And I noticed when I was working with people over and over again, including myself, that there were certain things I was having to say to people over and over again. I encapsulated that into my sleep methodology. So I've got something called the 5 non-negotiables, for example. If you're not sleeping well, if your energy's in your shoes, these are 5 things you want to be doing for the next 10 to 14 days. So I've encapsulated that in an online course, which came out last month. So that's a good place. If you're
Yeah.
exhausted, if you're not sleeping well, if you're having difficulty getting to sleep or staying asleep, go to the website, drnerina.com. Presumably that'll be in your show notes,
Yes.
and that's a good place to start. If you don't get any joy with that, I have books, or just Google me. There's loads of free content on the internet. I'm on all the usual social media platforms. No, I'm not on TikTok or Snapchat, but I keep being told by my daughter, I think, Mum, you need to get onto TikTok. So I might be dragged kicking and screaming into the 21st century at some point, but I'm on things like Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn if people want to find me there. Um, and it's at Dr. Nerina is the handle. But I would say to people, live your life from an inside out perspective rather than outside in. I think that's the biggest thing that I started looking, in my journey, tr trying all sorts of things. And I still do, I wake up in the morning, right? Go for my dog walk. What podcast am I going to listen to? I'll listen to Sherisse today, or I'll listen to We Can Do Hard Things, or whatever. Um, but really, fundamentally, at the core of it, I believe that you want more energy, you want more balance, you want to sleep better, you want to live a more fulfilling life. You've got to start inside. So meet yourself. What does that mean? When you wake up in the morning, first thing, don't go on your phone. Don't let that be the first thing you touch or look at. And I'm just as addicted as the next person. So my phone has to be switched off and in another room. I have to have a clock in my bedroom. Um, because otherwise I'd be on my phone first thing. But anyway, I've said too much. I'm rambling off now. But I'm very findable, put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely that. And I completely agree about the phone thing, by the way. That's something I tell my clients about straight away. They're like, I'm not sleeping. I'm like, move your
Brilliant.
phone, get it out of the way. But yeah,
Yeah.
amazing. I'll have all of those details in the bio, in the show notes. So everyone will be able to find you and also listen to your TED talk as well, because you didn't really mention that. So I thought I'd add that in there.
TED Talks, I've got meditations. I was commissioned by Amazon Audible to make 12 meditations. And I'm just about to make my own meditations as well. I'm just trying to decide whether to put them onto Spotify or onto the website. Not sure yet, but work
Yeah.
that out.
Well,
Yeah.
exciting times. And I think it's great that we can
Mm.
find you wherever anyone needs you. I feel like you've given us a nice little end off there, but I would like to ask you, I normally do this soul to soul thing, and it's like a soul message. So it could be just
Oh,
whatever based on the conversation, or maybe something you would have said to your younger self. But what in your heart do you feel like you need to express at this moment?
right. Sheree. Oh, my goodness. Oh, what would I say? What would I say from my soul to my younger self, right? To my younger self.
Yeah, or based on the
Or to,
conversation, what feels
yeah.
right.
Mm, mm. I think that my journey has been a journey of finding safety, finding inner
Mm,
safety. And so I would say to myself, hand on heart, or to your listeners, hand on my heart, we are safe. You are safe. I am safe. It is safe for me to be me. It's safe to be in my skin. It's safe to be in this life. And it may not feel like that. I might wake up tomorrow morning and not feel like that. But keep coming back to this. I am safe. My soul chose this journey, and it chose this journey knowing that it would be safe. It is safe. But for me, it's always about doing that work that keeps uncovering layer after layer after layer of doo-doo that blocks me, that stops me from feeling safe. I am safe, and you are safe. Yeah.
absolutely. And I
Mm.
couldn't have said it better myself. That's been something I've been working through my whole life as well. But
Mm.
thank you so much for joining me. And as I said, all of the notes will be there for anyone that wants to find you. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Sherisse. It's been a real privilege. I've really, really enjoyed our chat. Thank you.
Thank you.
If this episode resonated with you, please do like, follow, and share with someone that you know would benefit. If you're looking to dive in deeper to becoming your most unapologetic, most authentic, shining self, please do head to my website and join my newsletter, where you will find out about all of my upcoming events and speaking opportunities and all of the things that I have going on. And also, if you would like to work with me, please do drop me a DM on any of my socials or through my website. Love and light.